morning. Our story today is from Kristen Meyer from her book, A Good Telling. Long ago, there was a kingdom with a very kind king. And in this kingdom, there was a valley where beautiful flowers grew. The most beautiful, fragrant flowers you can imagine grew in this valley in the kingdom. And in the valley, there was a market, a village. And in the village, there was a market. And in the market, there was an inspector, a royal inspector who was inspecting the market because the king was going to come and visit. And the royal inspector wanted everything to be absolutely perfect. He wanted all of the fruits and vegetables in the fruit and vegetable stall to be the ripest, most luscious fruits and vegetables you could imagine. He wanted all the cloth and clothing to be vibrant and beautiful and perfectly tailored. And he wanted the flowers to be the most gorgeous, perfect flowers you can imagine. And as he looked around the market, he was pretty satisfied. Things looked very, very good. Now, in a forgotten corner of the valley, where no one really went anymore, there was a house and a garden and a little girl named Petula who lived there with her mother and her brothers and her sisters. Now, Petula loved her home and her garden. It was the most beautiful garden that you could imagine. She loved all living things, and she loved to just spend time with the growing flowers, watching the earthworms move around, watching the field mice. But on this day, Petula's mother told her she could not stay in the garden and play. She needed to go to the market and sell some flowers to get a little money for the family. And so she did. But on her way out of the garden, she stopped at the brindleberry bush, and she collected a few brindleberry flowers, and she wove their long stems together to make a garland, and she put it in her hair, and she made a few more to sell. And off she went to the market. As she walked along the cobblestones, she saw on the ground a tiny little black beetle, a shiny beetle, and she worried because there on the cobblestones in the market, the beetle could get trampled. So she stooped down to pick it up and move it somewhere a little safer. And as she was doing so, and she was concentrating on the beetle, and she was kind of moving forward, she bumped right into someone with long black robes. It was the inspector, the royal inspector, and he turned around and he said, "Who are you and why do you have weeds in your hair?" And Petula looked up at him and she said, "I am Petula, and these are brindleberry flowers." And she held up her garlands and she said, "A penny a garland." And he said, "Look at those weeds, those long, green, ropey stems. Those are not very nice, and those flowers are so tiny and puny. They look nothing like the good flowers that we want in our market. Why, look over there at the flowers at that stall. They are so big and bright. The blossoms are full." Now the woman, the flower seller working at the stall, just started to kind of glow. And she said, "Oh, those are the Bella Bella flowers. And I'll tell you something. The last time the king visited the marketplace, he remarked on how wonderful my flowers are." She was very excited. And the inspector said, "See," to Petula, "see, this is what I'm saying. The Bella Bella flowers are beautiful, and the flowers you have are puny." Now the very next day, there was a proclamation read in the village square, and it said that from now on, the only flowers that they could have in the whole valley were the Bella Bella flowers. All other flowers would be considered weeds, and in fact, the royal weed commissioner would be going around, digging up all the other flowers and planting only Bella Bella flowers. Now, this royal proclamation was not read in that tiny, forgotten corner of the valley where Petula's family lived. They had no idea this was going on and didn't really care. But everywhere else in the valley, people went around digging up any other flower, disposing of it, and planting the Bella Bellas instead. Now, a few weeks went by, and it was time for the king's visit, and the royal inspector was so excited. He had spent so much time working on this, and he looked around, and the fruits and vegetables gleamed, and the clothes and the cloth were so majestic, and the flower stall was empty. There were no flowers at all. And he said to the flower stall owner, he said, "What happened? Why are there no flowers?" And she said, "Oh, well, didn't you hear? The Bella Bella fungus has affected all of the Bella Bella plants. They are all dead and wilted. I have no flowers to sell." And the inspector said, "How can you not have flowers? It's time for the king's visit. We need flowers." And she said, "There just are not any Bella Bella flowers." He said, "Well, find some other flowers." And she said, "Well, all the other flowers were outlawed." And he said, "Who would do?" Oh. And then he remembered that he would do such a thing. The inspector was devastated. He went down, walking down the road to see if anywhere, maybe he could find a flower that was missed by the king's weed commissioner, but the king's weed commissioner was very thorough, and he could not find any flowers. All he saw were wilted, dying Bella Bella flowers. And he said out loud to himself, "What have I done? What have I done?" And he felt a tap, tap, tap on his shoulder. And there was Petula holding up one of her Brindleberry flower garlands and saying, "Penny a garland." The inspector said, where did you find those? Where did you get them?" And Petula said, "I'll show you." And she walked him over to her garden, and he was amazed. There in the garden was every flower imaginable, growing perfectly, including a Bella Bella plant that had been unaffected by the fungus because it was off to itself. Just then they heard the sound of the king's carriage moving along the road. The inspector went running and brought the king to the garden and showed him the wonderful flowers. Petula gave the king a garland, and he put it over his crown. He was so pleased. The next day there was a new proclamation in town, and it said two things. The first thing was that there was a new royal gardener, and it was Petula's mother. And the second thing it said was that from now on, all flowers are welcome to grow anywhere in the kingdom, because a garden needs all the flowers to be beautiful. Thank you for listening to my story today.